today I'm going to be making all things apple. And we're starting with apple and cinnamon scones. So I've got 275 grams of self-raising flour in my bowl here, and I'm going to add to that half a teaspoon of baking powder, which I'll show you here, half a teaspoon of baking powder, quarter teaspoon of salt, and a teaspoon of cinnamon, because I love cinnamon. So in that goes. We're going to sieve that into our bowl nicely. Don't skip this bit, everybody, it is important. It helps with the overall texture of your cakes. To that, I'm going to add 90 grams of spread. This is stork spread. You can use butter, you can use plant-based spreads, you can use lard, you can use whatever you want really. I prefer stork because it's not an overpowering taste. If I can get it out of the jar. And it mixes well, which is the main thing when you're doing this. So I'm going to use my pastry cutter to mix this all into here. So keep going until all your lumps have gone. And you're not baking unless you get it everywhere, everyone. So give it a shake, and the lumps, big lumps, come to the top. So just get rid of that. And when you've done that, it's ready. And I'm going to add to this a tablespoon of sugar. Now this is coconut sugar, it's just what I've got in my cupboard, so I thought I'll use that. You can add more if you wish, but cinnamon is fairly sweet to start off with. It can keep your blood sugars in check, cinnamon, so if you want to substitute cinnamon instead of sugar in some things, if you like the taste of cinnamon that is, then it's supposed to work. So mix that in, and then I'm going to add a chopped up apple. Now this is two small apples, two small apples chopped into small pieces. Now these are tiny pieces because we're putting them into scones. You can use any apple you want, just be aware that some apples don't cook as well as others. This is an eating apple. You can use Bramley apples, they're a bit sourer. It's up to you. I've used all kinds and generally eating apples, so we'll put that in. You can add more or less, it's up to you. And we're going to mix those in. As I say, when you mix things into a pastry or a cake, try to cover them all in flour. It stops them sinking to the bottom. What we're going to do now is put our liquid in, and we have one large egg and 90 grams of yogurt, and this is natural yogurt. This is Greek actually, and it's the low fat variety, so you don't have to use the full fat variety for this. We've got plenty fat in there with our butter and lard or margarine, whatever you're using. So we'll pop that in there and mix it in gently until it's all combined and looks uniform in colour. Now these are good eggs, look at those eggs, nice and yellow. Love a good free range egg. Okay, so we're more or less uniform now in colour, and pop all of this into our scone mixture. So just make it well in the middle and pop it in. And it's time to mix it in. Now don't add milk just yet, because you've got to remember the flour has had the apple in it, and there's a lot of juice in apples. They're quite moist, as we all know, that's why we eat them. So give it a little minute to mix it in. Okay, I am going to add a little bit of milk into there. So it's roughly a tablespoon, but you know, eyeballs. I'm sorry, I'm not using a tablespoon on this occasion. So there's about a tablespoon. Just don't overdo it, less is better until you get the right consistency, because if you overdo it, your scones won't rise. Don't. I've had that before where they've gone like in the bottom. Yes, I've had my trials with scones, everyone, as well. Right, this feels nice and moist now, so I'm going to try and bring it together and see how we go. So pop my fork to one side, get my hands in there, and just, yes, it feels nice and moist. It's sticking slightly to my hands, which is good. That means there is a good bit of moisture in there, and we need to get rid of the dry stuff on the bottom. So all we're doing is pushing it together. We're not kneading this. The best scones are made when you don't use a lot of pressure on them. Okay, I've got my oven set to gas mark 7 as per usual. I'm going to do a little tidy up, and then we're going to cut them out and put them in the oven. Sorry about the noise, guys. So I'm going to, as per, pop one on my tray and take one that we're going to make our scones on. Now, I always seem to use a 2-inch cutter. I think that's 2-inch, I'd like to say it is. Not sure, maybe 1.5 inches. I'm not sure. My husband says I'm useless at these kind of things, and he's right. I haven't got a clue when it comes to measurements. Right, so tip our scone mixture out, and we're going to pat it down, okay? So just pat it down until you get the right depth that you want. I'm typically a fairly thick person. Yeah, no comment on that one, please. I'm typically I don't know, that sort of depth, which is half my thumb depth. And we're going to cut them out. So there's one. You can egg wash these, or milk. You can put milk on them, it's up to you. But on this occasion I'm just going to sprinkle a little tiny bit of cinnamon sugar on here. So it's just brown sugar and cinnamon this. And when you've done that, just pat it down slightly. You don't want to press, you just want to pat. Just so it sticks to your scone, basically. Okay. And then I'm going to put it in the oven, gas mark 7, for 15 minutes. Just look at that. Isn't that, ooh, isn't that delicious? I'll try the bottom bit first. Bits of apple running through it. You can't miss it, can you? Lovely. Recommend. So I'm going to be making some apple crumble, good old-fashioned apple crumble. And to do that, you really need Bramley apples. I've used other apples in the past, and yes, they work. But the original recipe was with Bramley apples. I thought I'd put together a good old-fashioned apple crumble for you. So first of all, what we need to do is peel our apples and chunk them up. So to peel and chunk my apples, all I do is take a handy dandy speed peeler and a bowl, just pop that there for you, and just quickly peel your apples and just chop down each side. That's how I find it's the easiest. It's up to you though, whatever works for you. Bramley apples do get quite, what's the word I'm looking for? They do melt down a bit, so make sure you make reasonably decent sized pieces. Half of that will do actually. And if you do have any bits of core or anything in there, just get rid of them as you go. I would advise, I don't know if anybody else would, but I advise doing different sized pieces. For some you want to melt down and make a mush out of, and some you want to keep shape, which means you get texture in your crumble. So what I'm going to do now that I've finished chopping and peeling and chopping my apples, what I'm going to do is put them on the heat. I'm going to put the lid on and I'm going to let it cook until they're soft. So while my apple is cooking, you can maybe hear it sizzling a little bit in the background. I did put a little bit of water in there just because it didn't seem to have enough juice in it. What I'm going to do now is make the crumble. Now this is a traditional crumble topping, which my husband prefers. So this is how it is. It's 275 grams of self-raising flour. I've no idea why it's self-raising flour and not something else, to be fair. I'm not plain, I'm not sure. I've tried plain, it doesn't quite come out the same. but my mum made it with self-raising flour, so that's what I do. So into my flour I'm going to add half the quantity of margarine, spread, butter, whatever you want to put in. Don't use lard on this occasion please, it's not very good. So in that goes 125 grams, and we're going to get our fingers in here and rub it in. Yeah, I'm going to get messy, but my hands are clean. So now with crumble, you don't need to make it into fine breadcrumbs. In fact, it tastes better if you don't, and looks better as well. Comes out like a proper crumble. I usually do with my crumble is I add oats to it, so miss out about 1.5 ounces, which is 40 grams of flour, and add 40 grams of oats in its place. Now the easy thing to remember about crumble and making it is that it's always half the quantity of fat and sugar to your flour, which is super nice to remember. So if you're anywhere and you can't remember your recipe, put my channel on for starters and have a look at that. But secondly, it's half the quantity of fat to flour and sugar as well. So just give it a bit of a to-do. Rub it between your fingers and your thumbs, and you'll see it slowly start to get incorporated. And a good way to do it is just lift it, little rub and push, let it go down. This is our texture at the moment, and we're going to let it cook down a little bit more before we actually use it. So while that's doing that, we're going to add our sugar to our flour mixture. So now we've got our flour mixture and our butter rubbed in, we're going to add to it 125 grams of brown sugar. Now you can use demerara sugar, you can use caster sugar, you can use granulated sugar, you can use any sugar that you want really. This is coconut sugar because it's what I've got in the house, and I like the colour of it as well. And demerara sugar does the same as well. So I'm going to put 125 grams of sugar in there, and I'm going to get a fork just to mix it through and get rid of any lumps as I go. So you want this just to be distributed evenly throughout. There we go. And when you've done that, just put it to one side for a moment while we get our dish out. Now, cranberry apples, these are these at the moment. Now, as you can see, they have been reduced down. We still have large bits of apple that are cooked. We have some, well, call it mushier apple in the bottom. This is good because this gives us texture. Okay, so I'm going to use caster sugar. The reason I'm using caster sugar in this instance is because the caster sugar will dissolve. It won't leave a gritty texture inside my apple. And I'm not going to measure at the moment. So I know these apples are tart because I know what brambles are like. So measure with your heart. Give it a stir. Make sure it's all dissolved, which it doesn't take long when it's hot. And then taking a spoon, take a little piece out the bottom and see if it's okay. Now to me that is fine. And I think I put about 4 tablespoons of sugar in there. Now you can add cinnamon to this if you wish. You can add a bit of vanilla, that's always good. You can add sultanas. You could add a different fruit as well, such as raspberries, blackberries are a good one. Rhubarb's always good. You know, don't stick to apple if that's not what you want to do. Okay, so I'm going to put this into my pie dish. I'm going to pop all that in there, making sure to get everything because I do love a good root. I do like a good crumble. Once you've done that, give it a shake. Put your oven on to gas mark 6. Mine's still warm from the last thing that I did, so we're not too worried. And it's time to pile on our crumble. So I'm going to just push it all on, and then we pile it up in the middle. So just cover it over right to the edges. There we go. done. There we go. I have to say this smells divine. Give it a little shake. There we go, to evenly distribute it. And we're going to pop this in the oven, gas mark 6, for half an hour. I'm going to be making apple shortcake now. So I've set my oven to gas mark 7. I have chopped and peeled a load of apples and I've let them cool overnight with some sugar and some cinnamon added to my taste, as I showed you earlier in the earlier recipe. And what I'm going to do now is make the shortcake version. So for that I need some self-raising flour. And I'm afraid I'm going to have to do this in ounces because it's the only way I know how to do it. We'll start with 16 ounces of self-raising flour going into our bowl. There we go, 1 pound. To that I'm going to add half a teaspoon of baking soda, bicarbonate of soda to everybody else. And I'm going to sieve that, just gently. Get it all in there. If you're wondering what the flour is in grams, it's 315 grams. And we're going to add to that 4 ounces of margarine and we want 4 ounces of lard. There we go, 4 ounces. So I'm going to mix that in until it's like breadcrumbs. Now we've done that, what we need to do is add 4 ounces of sugar, and in this instance it's caster sugar. You can use normal sugar on this one, that's fine. Any sugar does. The only one I wouldn't use is dark brown or demerara unless you're changing the flavour profile. So 4 ounces of caster sugar, which is a lot, yes, but this is a big cake. So we've got our 4 ounces of sugar in our bowl and we're just going to fork that through now so that it's evenly distributed. I think I say that in every one of my videos, don't I? And once you've done that, it's time to crack an egg into the middle. This is 1 large egg, we're going to crack that in. There we go, and pop that to one side, give it a little swizz. Now this obviously is not going to bring all this together, so we're going to add a couple of tablespoons of milk. This is semi-skimmed milk that I'm putting in. So that's 1, and do 2. And we'll work from there. As I've said previously, it's always a good idea to err on the side of caution in these things because we never know how our flour is going to react. What we're aiming for with this is to bring it together into one dough ball. So it's like a pastry. Now as you can see it's still quite wet, dry, sorry, so I'm going to add another tablespoon of milk. How do I know it's dry? Well, there's a lot of mixture around the outside. So I'm going to add 2 tablespoons and hopefully that will do it. Now this is a very old recipe. It was in the B-Row baking book originally. As I say, you can't bake unless you make a mess. And this is something my nana and my mum used to make. Now doing that, I can feel it's still a little bit dry. But we're gonna work with it because there's a lot of fat in here and that will bring it together quite easily, I would say. Yeah, I think that's still a bit dry. You can feel it in your hands. If it's not, doesn't need to stick to your hands, but it does need to be moist, and if it's feeling dry, put some more milk in, guys. I'll give it 2 because there is quite a lot of flour here. Right, that's better. You can see it's clumping a lot better now. And I'm going to bring it together with my hands. So yes guys, it's time to get in there with those hands. And you'll be able to tell straight away if this is too dry, which it isn't because I can feel it sticking to my fingers. So by the time we've got all this in one ball, it should be tickety-boo. And you do need to knead it to bring it all in together, as you can see here. As you can see, it's come together now. So what we need to do now is cut it in half and roll it out. Okay, so what I'm going to do is get some parchment and I'm going to roll out my dough onto my parchment paper until it's the same size as my tray here. So this is my tray. Doesn't have to be perfect. Don't forget this is homegrown, not shop bought. Put a little bit of flour on it so that hopefully it doesn't stick, but there is a lot of fat in this, so it may well do. Okay, there's a bit of that. Let's get one bit out. Pop it on there. Press it down. Get my rolling pin. Need a little bit more flour for my rolling pin, which I'll do over this. Yeah. And what we're going to do is make it more or less the size of the tray. So just keep going until it's the right size. Time is, you know, relax when you're doing your baking is what I think. Enjoy it. Doesn't matter if it's not perfect, so long as you enjoy what you're doing. And to be fair, I love baking. Doesn't always get good results, no, but then whatever does. It just has to fit the bottom of my tin, so I think that'll do. So I'm gonna bring it in, and what I do with it now that it's in is I just press it into its corners and things. Just a little bit of pressure to ensure that it's gonna be in the right places. What I need to do now, all I'm gonna do now is put my apple and cinnamon and sugar mixture onto here. So I'm going to spread it out across here. Back of my wooden spoon would be easier, wouldn't it? Rather than dirty anything. And just spread it all out. Right to the edges as far as you can. All I'm going to do now is roll out the other piece. So I'll pop that to one side. So I'm going to pop a little bit, not a lot, a little flour down. I don't want this one to stick. So I've got to be as careful as I can with this bit. Get our other part out. Press it together and down and try and make it into an oblong shape. And then let's just put some flour on our rolling pin. That went well, not. There we go. Away we go. Same again. As wide as we can. This is how I'm going to do it, guys. I'm going to take my pastry and gently pop it on top. Now it will move, so don't worry. And it will split as well, because it will. Then we're going to smoosh it around until it gets to where it should be. Because obviously I haven't made it big enough, which is always an issue. This is delicious, this, I have to say. It's one of my favourite things. Now, if it's like that on the edges, don't worry. And then I'm going to prick it all over with a fork. My nanny used to do it, so as she did it, I'm doing it. Just haphazard everywhere. This is what it used to look like when my nana did it as well. Slightly higgledy-piggledy, but tasty. I'm going to add a little bit of granulated sugar. I'm just going to sprinkle it on the top. So in it goes. And we're going to put that in an oven on gas mark 7 for about 25 to 30 minutes until it's nice and golden.